Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here today. Today we have a very interesting topic, of course, in relation to the book of Professor Ahmet Kuru, Islam, Authoritarianism and Underdevelopment. I'm happy to also welcome Dr. Cengiz Günay, Director of the Austrian Institute for International Politics, whom we cooperate in this evening and event, but also on many other occasions. So we join forces, which is particularly necessary in times like these. Of course, once again, a warm welcome to Professor Ahmet Kuru, who already has spent a few days in Vienna, joining another conference also. Maybe he might refer to this later on. And I might also, if you allow, I thank you, of course, for each and everyone, but also welcome Professor Lolke, one of the most outspoken, experienced experts on Islam, Islamic extremism, and issues related to radicalization, but also de-radicalization. So thank you for joining us and adding, hopefully, to the discussion afterwards. Without further delay, I leave the floor to Cengiz Günay and Professor Ahmet Kuru. Thank you very much.
Do I need the mic? No, people can hear me. Okay. Good evening, also from my side. Thank you, Sabine, for organizing this event. And also thank you to Professor Kuru for joining us. Let me quickly introduce Ahmet Kuru to you, and then I would kindly ask you to give a short presentation of your book. Then we will have a kind of conversation about the book. I'll ask a couple of questions, and then I would like to open the floor because I'm sure there are also further questions among our audience. So, Ahmet Kuru is the director of the Center for Islamic and Arabic Studies and professor of political science at San Diego State University. He is the author of Secularism and State Policies Towards Religion, the United States, France, and Turkey, published by Cambridge University Press in 2009. And he is also the co-editor, together with Alfred Stepan, of the book Democracy, Islam, and Secularism in Turkey, published by Columbia University Press in 2012. And this is his most recent book, or the German translation of his most recent book, called, in English, Islam, Authoritarianism and Underdevelopment, a Global and Historical Comparison. May I invite you to give an overview of the book, of its main thesis, and maybe also some details you want to share with us, and then I would also ask you to keep it to 15 to 20 minutes max so that we have enough time for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cengiz, for being the moderator, and of course, Dr. Sabin for organizing. I'm very happy to be with you tonight in Vienna. For many reasons. One of them is that my painting is in your museum. So when I published my secularism book, some of my colleagues said that the book is great, but not the cover. I say, look at the content, ignore the cover. For Islam book, I said, I spent 10 years, then I should be more careful about the cover. And then, bless you, then I find that this wonderful portrait painted by Renaissance painter Giorgione, the three philosophers. One interpretation is that there is ancient Greek philosopher, Islamic philosopher, possibly Ibn Rushd, then the Renaissance philosopher. The combination of the three means a cultural exchange, and to show how Islamic civilization play a major role learning from Antiquity and teaching to Renaissance Europe. So another important reason for me, of course, the German edition coming out that we are discussing tonight. I was in France 2 months ago for the French translation of the book, and some discussion there are very similar. And when they ask me, what is the relevance of your book for European public? I said that many things, but two important points. One is that both Islamists and Islamophobes or critics of Islam, is my voice okay? Good. They both argue that there is no separation between religion and state in Islam, although Christianity endorses church-state separation. And this is one of the main cliché my book tried to deconstruct, criticize, and refute, because it shows that from 8th to mid-11th centuries, there was a very institutionalized separation between certain Islamic authorities called ulema and the state. The state ulema cooperation, what I call ulema-state alliance, emerged only after the 11th century, which is important for current debates because when French laïcs say that Islam is not compatible with secularism, liberalism, democracy, I say no, there are multiple interpretations of Islam. There is a history of separation that gives Muslims today to interpret in a particular way. The second reason why my book is very much related to European debates about Islam and Muslims is that it documents how Muslims learn philosophy from Greeks and taught to Europe, learn paper making from China and taught to Europe, and learn mathematical things and then taught that's why we use Arabic numerals today. And this way, Muslims today, Muslim youth in Germany, Austria, France, elsewhere, when they learn how Muslims had strong connection with Europe, at a time when Europe was underdeveloped, Muslims were developed, at a time where Muslims were richer, more sophisticated, having larger libraries, better system of paper production, and better philosophy than they taught to Europe. And today, therefore, Muslim youth, when they try to integrate to European progress, European democracy, European system, they may feel comfortable saying that, oh, we have long-term connection. There is no mutual exclusion between so-called civilizations. I am part of this progress. This is universal progress we all share together, and they can maybe more easily be integrated. So these are the reasons. Maybe there is another factor in my book tours in Europe, which is my personal safety. So I feel safe in Vienna. I was safe in Paris. I had a book tour in Netherlands. But unfortunately, I wasn't safe in Malaysia. So last year, I went to Malaysia and Pakistan for presenting the book. I was very worried about Pakistan because I had articles, talks, and very influential, internationally recognized argument against blasphemy and apostasy laws. So my articles about blasphemy and apostasy laws translated 12 languages. So then many of Pakistani friends say, don't come here because apostasy is a reason to be murdered. And you have writings, you are not safe here. Then I kept digging, but I had an unstoppable desire to go Pakistan. I really wanted to go Pakistan. And a Pakistani friend say, you are undermining Malaysia. Malaysia may be more difficult for you. So to make long story short, I booked my tickets, 7 days Malaysia, 7 days Pakistan. Immediately before my travel to Pakistan, Islamists started a Facebook attack, saying that he is liberal, he is coming to destroy Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah Sunni Islam. Then in a way that I try to protect myself. I find a t-shirt, I am not a liberal, and I put it on my Facebook. Then my American friends, Democrats, say, Ahmed, oh my God, are you becoming Republican? Will you vote for Trump? I say, no, man, I try to survive, okay? It's a survival strategy for me. After Malaysia, I will remove it. So then I went there, Islamists There were some threats coming to email, and then many Facebook, and then thousands of comments saying, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. So my mother and my wife read it. They say, Ahmet, when someone killed, we say, Inna lillah, inna ilayhi raji'un. So this is serious. So they canceled my talk. Turkish ambassador also came after me saying that he's a critic of our government. We don't like him. The police came to our events. The Sharia police came. There were questions about Sharia. So they asked my opinion about Sharia, where Sharia police were recording. Then they came to arrest me to the airport. I don't know whether arrest, but they tried to seize my passport. I reached Ziauddin Serdar, who is a British intellectual. He is now advising Prime Minister. So we reached Prime Minister. So Prime Minister office stopped the policeman. I went to Pakistan and texted the Supreme Court judges who invited me to Islamabad. 6 hours, no internet. I arrived at Lahore airport. Then I opened my phone, and the judge was scared to directly send me a message. His friend told me that you have to leave Pakistan immediately. It's not safe. You go. Then in 4 hours, I find another plane from Silkot airport, and I left. So this is my trauma. I still want to go to Pakistan, I don't know, but I save here. This is my story. So now, very briefly about the book's content. It starts with today, why Muslim majority countries have lower level of democracy and lower level of socioeconomic development, despite their early achievement in science and philosophy. When we look at this puzzle, we see that Muslim majority societies today have a vicious circle of authoritarianism, underdevelopment, and some level of violence. And I explain this by monopolization of power by ulema and their political ally state, who marginalize merchant class, who marginalize intellectual class. Some people, as I said, both Islamists and critics of Islam, assume that it is the essence of Islam. This is your nature of your society. There is nothing you can do. But no, Muslim societies were very different. From 8th to 12th century, for 400 years, ulama were very independent. All the major founders of Sunni schools of thought, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi, Hanbal, they stood against political authorities. Shias refused Umayyad and Abbasi religious political authorities. And that separation between clergy and state create an environment in which philosophers emerge. Khwarizmi, mathematician, Ibn Sina, metaphysical theoretician, Razi, medical doctor, Ibn Haytham, the producer of first camera. Until the 11th century, things were very good. 11th century, we can open in the Q&A, was a time of crisis. Economic crisis led to semi-feudal system. Muslims left the market economy, embraced semi-feudal system. Then religiously, there emerged a new Sunni hierarchy with ulema-state alliance, and politicization and militarization of the state system by the coming of Seljuk Turks, nomad Turks from Central Asia to Iran and Iraq. So that's the argument about 11th century. I sent it to a Turkish-American professor. What do you think? He said, Ahmet, you showed that we, the Turks, destroy Islamic civilization by coming as the nomads from Central Asia. I said, no, my friend, it's not us Turks. Yes, military, Seljuk, then Ottoman. But also Arabs, because Abbasi caliphs were Arabs. And then Persians, because the great scholar Ghazali was Persian, so was Nizam ul-Mulk, the prime minister of the Seljuk Empire. So they marginalized once powerful merchant class with a semi-feudal economic system. And then when merchants marginalize, the scholars need funding. And the funding coming from centralized, politicized madrasa system called Nizamiya madrasas. And these 11th century production of madrasas are still very relevant, influential, powerful today. And their curriculum excludes Maturidi Theological School, which was rationalist, exclude philosophical thought, and only focus on Islamic sciences in a very narrow sense. Meanwhile, Europe transformed after Gregorian reform of the mid-11th century. Europe started to institutionalize church separation. And in the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries in Italy, then after that Netherlands, a bourgeois class started to emerge, universities emerged, while Europe having multiple progressive reforms, printing revolution, geographical discoveries, the Reformation, scientific revolution, before that Enlightenment, Muslims were almost regressive or stuck with military mentality. They had three empires, Ottoman, Safavi, Mughal. The three empires only use the three Chinese techniques Europe used very efficiently. Europe used printing press, nautical compass, and gunpowder. Whereas the Muslim empires, Ottoman and others, only use gunpowder. They didn't get printing technology until 1726, which means about 300 years after Europe did it. And that resulted in scientific stagnation, low literacy rate, and once Muslims were better than Europe in terms of libraries, production of books, and the schools, no more in the 17th, 18th centuries, at the time of colonization, especially in the Middle East, Muslims pedagogically, scientifically, economically were backward. Then came colonization, which made reform even more difficult. Coming today, some people thought that, okay, so are you suggesting a Kemalist solution? No, I am not, because my first book was a critique of Kemalist secularism in Turkey. Because Muslim reformers in the 20th century, yes, they were modernists, yes, they gave rights to women, that was, I appreciate. But at the same time, they never truly appreciate bourgeois class and its economic independence, and intellectual class, it is cultural intellectual independence. Therefore, what we need as a reform today in the Muslim world, we need to dismantle ulema-state alliance, but sidelining ulema is necessary but insufficient. Sidelining ulema should be combined by a new mentality where we appreciate economic entrepreneurs and intellectuals. That's the argument and solution I offer in the book. That's my summary.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. Maybe my first one would be, I fully can agree with the approach to explain things through a historical lens, because I myself am a historian and then was trained in political science. But it's rather seldom in political science that political scientists apply historical or do historical work in that regard. What is the explanatory power of history in your regard? Why do you think that these going to the archives and find these explanations in, or the patterns you describe in history, what is the explanatory power, you'd say?
Thank you. This is a great question. Many people are puzzled by the fact that a book about today goes so back to history. Why? A short answer is an interview I gave to Pakistan, and then they used the title, "Why are Muslims still stuck in history?" Okay, so it is a generalization, I know. I'm not saying all Muslims are stuck in history. But for majority of Muslims, as well as I know many countries, history has legitimacy, but today does not have legitimacy. For example, if you tell my ideas to a Muslim, Ahmet Kuru of San Diego 2025 say this, they say, who is he? We don't care. But if you say is Ibn Ahmad in 12th century of 12th century said this, they would listen. They would take it seriously. Oh, a historical alim said this? I don't know why, but there is such an idea that people today are corrupt, They are not trustworthy intellectually. But historical alims, ulama, their views are closer to God's grace. They are the true Muslims. They are spiritually superior. So that's why, for me, in order to convince my audience, it was strategically important to show them that Islam has a history of progress and the separation of ulama and state. That's one thing. The second thing, when I look at modern debates, there are constant references to history. The Islamists, when they are attacked about the questions, why don't we have Nobel Prize winners in the Muslim societies? They say, oh, we had a great golden age, Ibn Sina, Ibn Rushd. But the debate, what is the characteristic of that era? For Islamists, it's all about religion. The secularists, starting with Ernest Renan in late 18th century speech, there was no golden age, Muslims just imitated Greek philosophy, therefore nothing to do with religion. The position in the book is between. The position is that, yes, Muslims learned from Greek and others, but there were their own Islamic contributions, synthesizing, producing they criticized Ptolemy, they criticized Galen and others. But my very strong answer to Islamists that the golden age was an age of coexistence, diversity, openness. It was not a time of religious orthodoxy. Therefore, if you want to impose an orthodoxy, you are far from the golden age. The philosophers, Ibn Sina, Ibn Rushd, if they tried to live in Iran, in Malaysia, in Pakistan today, they would be attacked as being heterodox. So therefore, for these two reasons, I really delve into history. There are other reasons, comparing Christian and Muslim societies, and also teaching the Western audience that Muslims once had a very developed civilization. Don't be racist, don't be anti-Muslim, appreciate this cultural diversity and richness. And also, whenever I promote democracy, toleration, diversity, liberalism, some Muslims say, don't teach us American propaganda. This is Western project. I am saying in the book, no, it's not a Western project. I'm telling that diversity, toleration, openness, creativity, dynamism once were the elements of Muslims in history, and this can inspire them today.
Thank you so much, but the book title might be suggesting that Islam is kind of one of the reasons for authoritarianism and underdevelopment. And that might fall in line with the arguments of essentialists who say, you know, Islam per se is the problem. I mean, you don't join this choir and you say, you defend a different argument. You say it's actually the alliance between the ulema and the military elite that was the reason for this orthodoxy that developed in the Islamic world. Maybe could you, I'm not sure if the entire audience is aware of the differences between Islam and Christianity in principle. I think there's quite often Islam is judged and discussed through the lenses of Christianity, as if there was a church also in Islam. There is not. So what's the role of the ulema? Maybe you could explain that. And my follow-up question on that is, what role, I mean, the ulema is, you will better explain now, but scriptural is Islam. But then there is a huge variety of lived Islam as well. And how does that kind of, how is that interaction, interplay with scriptural Islam when it comes to underdevelopment and authoritarianism?
It's so great. I need 1 hour because there are 3 questions. So, okay, starting with the first one, but each of them are so inspirational. Thank you. Yeah, because the first one, even my family members said, Ahmet, why did you choose this title? Because you make Islam connected to bad things. So there was a song, you gave love a bad name. So you gave Islam a bad name, right? Bon Jovi. So the reason why I do that is that, first of all, there is a question. People ask about Islam and authoritarianism, Islam and underdevelopment. And I put the question there without question mark. And the answer is no, it is not Islam, but as you say, ulema state alliance. For some people it's still Islam, but many others it's not. For me it's not Islam, but it's a particular historical construct with certain institutional elements happen in history, continue until today. So that's why the provocative title. Only the Dutch title we changed because my publishers asked one more popular, and we made Islam and Muslims, Golden Age and Contemporary Crisis. But basically, I put the question there to provoke and open a discussion. But the argument says it is not Islam in general, ulema state alliance. The second thing in your question, which Islam we are talking about, right? So there's a great scholar in America wrote a similar book. I invited him to San Diego. We discussed, and he read the book, then sent me an email saying that, Ahmet, there's a big problem in the book. I said, how can we fix it? Is it too late? He said, you don't tell us what the true good Islam is in the book. I said, oh my God, I'm happy. That's the point. Because I didn't put I'm a Muslim, I have my own understanding of Islam, but I didn't put it there. I tried to create a platform of discussion. With the harm principle, as long as you do not harm physically others, you may have radical ideas about religion, you may have fundamentalist or whatever interpretations, but you should not monopolize. We should not accept hegemony of this. So in this regard, yes, some people scripturalists, some people Sufi, some interpret, but I think the Muslim civilization was very dynamic enough to embrace. No longer the case is the problem. One example, in 9th century Baghdad, Muslims established a hospital where the medical chief doctors are Christian and Jews. 6 centuries later, they established another major hospital called Mansour Hospital in Cairo. This time, they wrote that non-Muslims cannot be medical doctors, non-Muslims cannot be even treated as patients. So the best 3 doctors at the time in Cairo were Christian. So they ceremonically convert to Islam to practice medicine. It shows how instead of having progress, we have a regression from more open-minded, we became close-minded. That's the problem. So in this regard, there are multiple Islams, which is good. And the book is not an Islamic reform project saying that this is bad Islam, this is good Islam. No. Every Islam is people's opinion. We just need to respect diversity. That's why I have a problem with apostasy blasphemy laws, because after these laws became more prominent after the 11th century, and today they try to reimpose it by not allowing diverse views. And last of your 3 great questions, ulema. So,
could you explain what the ulema is and the role it plays?
So it's coming from Arabic term alim, and alim is a knowledgeable person. And in the Quran, we have the Professor Rüdiger, the expert here, but let me tell that there is no reference to ulama as a class of clergy. There are references to alim in a way that a knowledgeable person. To make the long story short, Sunni Islam emerged with the idea that after the death of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, there is no holy person, everyone equal. The Shia argue that son-in-law of the Prophet Ali, then his son Hassan, Hussein, then 7 imams, 12 imams are sacred people. Therefore, Shia Islam institutionalized, like Catholic Church. They have called ruhban, or the clergy class. I had Iranian friends saying that when we pray in the mosque, one of the clergy came and said, you should pray again after me. You cannot pray yourself. I need to lead because I'm clergy. So anyhow, that's maybe resembling Catholics. But Sunnis were like Protestant, that no clearly defined clergy, no sharp diversity between laymen and clergymen. But after the 11th century, Sunnis transformed. The ulema class resemble the Shias. The madrasa system make them very much defined. And today, ulema, whenever they need to take responsibility, they say we don't exist. For example, if you are anti-clerical in Catholic tradition, we know what the Pope said. I know that Pope Pius in 1876 published a syllabus of error where he says that separation of church and state and the idea that everyone can choose their religion are damned ideas. It's in the record. Vatican cannot deny it. But ulama has no archive, no record. They don't take any responsibility. When I say you are responsible for the delay of the printing press, they say no, zero responsibility, and we don't exist. But when I talk about...
What do you mean by we don't exist?
We don't. They say there is no clergy in Sunni Islam.
And yet they exist.
But they exist. But when they say that, whenever you and I, we talk about Islam, they say, who gave you the authority? We have the authority. You don't have the authority. You cannot talk. And then who has authority? Then LSR in Cairo, Diyanet in Turkey. So in theory, they don't exist, but in practice, they are existing. With this book, I try to put them under spotlight. That's why they don't like the book. Because I say, look, there is these guys, ulama, they make Sharia law and say this is Allah's law. No, it is not God's law, it is their law. They are responsible historically, they don't take any responsibility. And as long as we don't criticize them, we will not progress. So this is what I mean by ulama, this is why I criticize them. And the early ulama would agree with me. I can even find many references from Ghazali's Ihya Ulumuddin about the importance of the separation between political and religious authorities. That's why the book is very strong, because it is not an anti-ulama book. It's a book saying that ulama, in the first 400 years, were a good scholarly class, then they became politicized, took a wrong way, and we should change it.
Mm-hmm. Throughout history, the state as a unit and as a construction played an important role in Muslim society, for Muslim societies. So for instance, for the Ottoman Empire, the state was kind of the protector of the Ummah, of the community of Muslims. Maybe I misunderstood, but from your explanations now, I feel like as if the ulema is to blame for this hardening, but isn't it the other way around, that the state kind of co-opted the ulema and also other independent, societal groups and tried to control everything? And we see similar things today, as you mentioned, Diyanet and Al-Azhar, but also Zaytuna in Tunisia, for instance. They are kind of institutions created by the state in order to legitimize religiously the policies of the state, right? It's the states have tried to create something like an official institution of Islam, whereas in Sunni Islam, such a thing doesn't really exist. Yeah. So isn't it the state that has kind of co-opted this class?
This is a $1 million question. This question is so important that I thought about it many, many years.
Sorry to interrupt you, because there are really odd examples how policies are legitimized by the ulama. Like, I don't know, beer production in Egypt, or I don't know, anti-birth.
When the government asks them to do.
Right, exactly.
So the first presentation of the book was made in Norway. Mm-hmm. And in the morning, there were two talks. A scholar asked questions saying similarly that isn't it state is so powerful, controlling even ulama. And in the afternoon talk, he raised a hand and said, don't you undermine ulama? Ulama are the brain after everything. I said, are you the same person asking the question? Yes. I think you really confirmed the whole argument, ulama-state alliance. So this is a synthetic argument, ulama-state alliance. Why? From history to present, state monopolized coercive authority. Yes, in the Ottoman Empire, we have two Sheikhul Islam, the chief ulema, for every sultan. So sultans reappoint them. Very rarely kill them because ulema had the legitimacy, very rarely, but they can renominate them. So the sultan had the Kanun, lawmaking, and even today, as you say, MBS, for example, now, putting in prison many Wahhabi ulama, they have power.
Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm.
Saudi Arabia today. And your other examples you gave are right about Egypt, Turkey. But in the long run, the ulama is the main architect of Muslim societies because historically in the Ottoman Empire, they control education system, madrasa system. They control the public discourse about Islam, and they completely control lawmaking except the Kanun of the Sultan. The Sultan uses his sword to make it possible. Otherwise, ulama would not even give the right to Sultan to have the law. In the modern times, with the Tanzimat reform in Turkey, Muhammad Ali Pasha in Egypt, they diminish ulama's educational and legal positions. But now they are coming back. I analyzed 50 Muslim majority country constitution, and in the last 40 years, the number of constitutions referring to Sharia jumped from 1 to 17. And in every Muslim country almost, there is legal, political, social Islamization. Because despite all the reforms of Atatürk, Muhammad Ali Pasha and others, ulama was very smart. They back off, but they keep the theory very strong. That the Quran, Hadith, Ijma, Qiyas. So Quran and Hadith are the texts. And then you can make analogies, but ulama's consensus are legal criterion. So ulama shape the gender relations with their particular interpretation of women's rights in the Muslim world. If they can make it law, make law. If they cannot legalize, they make it a public discourse. Ulama shape the identity of the country with the keeping the religious discourse in a conservative way. So historically, in the Ottoman Empire, whenever the Janissaries revolt and remove a sultan, they always get the fatwa from the ulama. Historically, when I visited European cities, including Vienna, I see city hall. Wherever I go for Muslims, I say, where is the city hall? There is no city hall. Because the laws and decisions are made by the political class, sultan and their military, and the ulama. They never let the people to be part of lawmaking, the idea of Sharia and ulama authority. And today, with Islamization, once again, ulama coming to stage. In some cases, like Iran, they say, let us say no, we the state. Now we have the Sunni version in Taliban. We don't know what is going to happen in Syria. In other versions, like Saudi Arabia, monarch seems to be strong, or Turkish Diyanet under the state. But they have long-term and short-term strategies. State, everywhere state, for example. Why do we have women's rights more problematic in Muslim societies than comparatively many other societies? States are not inherently misogynistic or patriarchal. The patriarchal discourse is very much promoted by ulama. This is just one example how they back off from the direct clash, but shape long run the discourse.
Well, you would have the same in Catholic Church. It's also a very patriarchal system. I mean, if you say that the ulema is kind of responsible for this conservatism, social conservatism, you could also argue that, I don't know, the Catholic Church or other religious organizations aren't very much progressive in that regard. So where would you see the difference between?
No difference. You had to dismantle church-state alliance, and you did in Europe. And we have to do it in Muslim societies, 100%. That's one thing. In my country, America, now we have a big problem with evangelicals and Trump. if we don't stop this, evangelicals will push a religious agenda in the Supreme Court, in the Congress, everywhere. We have congressmen asking university professors recently, don't you believe in Bible? So therefore, if you don't put boundaries like the First Amendment in American Constitution, this clergy will not be stopped. The second thing is Second Vatican Council, 1984. So the Catholic Church changed its doctrines to a certain extent. So we need such propositions about the freedom of speech, women's rights, about the abolishment of apostasy and blasphemy laws in the Muslim world.
But as far as I understand, you argue that it needs to come from within the clergy and can't be imposed by the state, because there were several attempts, like, for instance, the Kemalist reforms tried to kind of reform religion top-down, but apparently it hasn't really affected the ulema in Turkey in the long run, as you argue, in that regard.
But I would say that neither state nor ulema, they should let civil society, individuals like myself, Muslims, should be able to contribute to the discourse. Because now this ulema-state alliance, for example, I am not for a Kemalist way of state interjection, no. But I'm not for letting ulema decide what Islam is, no. I'm for an open discussion. As long as state is not supporting ulema, ulema cannot impose us such an hegemony. That's what I'm trying to dismantle the two.
Could you briefly explain who the ulema is? I mean, we've used that word quite often, like how can you become part of the ulema? Because I think it's not so clear. Maybe not everybody is that familiar with the concept.
Sure. Let me tell you, for example, we have had the debate about Islamization, Sharia, political Islam. Who produced these ideas? It's not Prophet Muhammad, no. We have three texts. Two from 11th century. One is Ghazali, a major 11th century scholar. And the last third portion of his book, Al-Iqtisad fil I'tiqad, Moderation in Faith, he talked about Islamic government, caliphate. Then Mawardi, in his book Ahkam Sultaniya, which is governance principles, he talked about caliphate. Until the 11th century, there was no rule, no book about the idea of Islamic government, Islamic principle of Sharia rule. 2 centuries later, Ibn Taymiyyah wrote the book Siyasat-i Shari'i, which is Sharia-based politics. So, other than the three, we don't have much. But who gave them authority? Because they are regarded ulama class, top ulama. You can become an ulama member and push for reform. And Ali Abdul Razak did it in 1925 in Cairo, Egypt. He wrote a pamphlet, a short book, saying that Islam is not a political religion. The main message of Islam is morality. When the Prophet Muhammad was dying, he did not leave a political successor. What happened? Al-Azhar Ulema Council met. They decide that this book is against Islam. They remove his degree, kick him out of ulama class, and he was a judge in an Islamic Sharia court. He became unemployed. So this is the authority we are talking about. They can come together. So in Egypt, Al-Azhar, and there is Grand Mufti office. They decide what Islam is, who became an apostate, what is Sharia, what is not.
So you have to be a graduate of Al-Azhar to become part of the... There are certain institutions.
Yes, and also you keep shut your mouth in order to stay there. Otherwise, they remove you.
Mm-hmm. And is there something like an international ulema, or is it very nation-state-based?
No, that's a great question. There was a European Council of Ulema led by Qaradawi. Qaradawi was an Egyptian Muslim brother, then in exile, he was in Qatar. And during the Arab Spring, Qaradawi was having a program called Sharia and Life in Al Jazeera TV, very popular, and he was very political. He was asking anyone to shoot Gaddafi at the head in Libya. He was supporting revolution in Egypt, etc. Then came the coup d'etat in Egypt. Saudis support Sisi, and then Saudi Arabia and others push Qatar to shut down. And then Qatar could not resist more. Qaradawi's program was removed, and then he died. An alternative European international ulema was created by United Arab Emirates. There is a famous convert scholar in America, Hamza Yusuf. Hamza Yusuf studied in Mauritania. So how do we know they are ulema? Because when I talk, I am Ahmet. You kindly say Professor Ahmet, but for them it's not important to be professor. He called Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. How did he become Sheikh? He learned in Mauritania, studied with Bin Bayya. So the United Arab Emirates, with their money, established an ulama council and brought from Mauritania, Bin Bayya, to UAE. Now they have an alternative. They try to influence the Muslim world. But out of all these alternatives, I think the most progressive one is in Indonesia. There is a group, Nahdlatul Ulama. They are open-minded. They invited me to Jakarta and Bali, and they have a reform project saying that we should not use the term infidel, kafir, for our citizens. All citizens should be treated peacefully without labeling as infidel. No need for Sharia law, parliament law are fine. And their agenda is more progressive in Indonesia. So there is a competition, Indonesia, Qatar, UAE, that's the international level.
But nevertheless, I believe they don't have this legitimacy, if you like, in many places. They try to create something above nation states, and yet these institutions such as Diyanet in Turkey and Al-Azhar in Egypt, and you could continue the list, they have a very strong power because they are closely tied to the to these states, right? I mean, they have a public function, if you like, by legitimizing state policies.
Definitely. So they have resources in terms of money, buildings, institutions. They have number. When we say Diyanet, 100,000 imams. Yeah. So I am one single individual. After I published the book, I find good friends like you, 15 translation of the book tours. It's all individual help because people want to discuss it, they are interested in it. There is no state or funding, etc. But institutional resources of ulama are massive. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I could continue with this conversation, but I would like to open up the floor and give room for some questions or comments if there are any.